Okay.
Being recorded.
Okay. Is that am I sufficient? Am I blocking anybody's view here? No. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the power of observation, which is really about the type of research methodology that we've been using in Wolters Kluwer in the last couple of years, especially to underpin a lot of our product development. And it's something that we're hoping to really sort of bring to the legal market. So just a little bit about me. I'm the Customer Insights Manager in our product development team, or product management team as it's more properly known. Also got two colleagues with me here today. We've got Jessica Caladolce there, who's responsible for the corporate segments and who's actually done a lot of this research as well as part of the team. And we've got Dave Hawley. He's the newly appointed legal segment manager for product management, so somebody I think you guys could really get involved with as we develop our new legal strategy. So that's a little bit about us, and of course we're Wolters Kluwer. Everyone familiar with Wolters Kluwer as opposed to CCH, so it's very much a new branding exercise that we're to be referred to as Wolters Kluwer from now on. So if I do in fact say CCH, it's just habit. Okay, so what we'll be going through today is, we call it the power of observation, and it's really about how we uncover the intentions and behaviours that drive good design. So that's user behaviours, customer behaviours. So what I'm going to do is I'll start off by explaining what the goal is behind this sort of design. Then I'll talk about why it's actually difficult to get to the end point of good design. I'll go through what we call the Bolognese test, which is a really basic example to give you an understanding of the difference between explaining something and actually observing something as it informs design. Then we'll talk about contextual inquiry, which is what we actually do. And then I'll give you some examples of what we've done, what we've uncovered, where the product development is going, and what we see as the future using this methodology. So I'll start off with a couple of cartoons. I do like, anyone seen this one before? Okay, anyone seen an example of the third app down there? Yeah. Okay, so what this is really about is good design. So what somebody like Apple does, what somebody like Google does, is they really understand what people are trying to do, what they're actually trying to do. So if you look at the way that it's pictured here, it's very, very simple. So they do a couple of things, they do them very, very well. Behind that is a real good understanding of how users operate, what they actually want to do, and what the end point is of them using a particular tool or a piece of software. What other companies tend to do is feature-rich, bombard the user with lots and lots of little inefficient steps that really don't serve the user. They might serve the company, but they don't actually serve the purpose of the user. Anyone seen this one before? Okay, so this is a neat little cartoon about design and development according to the traditional model, where you start with an idea, somebody thinks of a great idea, somebody talks to a couple of customers, then they come back to the company, and each stage gradually get further and further away from the intention of the design. So I think we've all seen products like this. We all know companies that produce products and software that are very, very similar to this type of design model. That's what we're really trying to avoid with doing things like contextual design, is to get away from a design, an approach that really doesn't embrace what the user or the customer wants. So you say, well, why don't we just talk to the user? I'm sure there's a lot of fans of Dilbert here. They do the sort of a business common sense and understanding and philosophical approach to Dilbert, I think, that goes way beyond some of the gurus. So this particular issue, okay, interviewed hundreds of users, turned all their suggestions into features. It raises a couple of issues about design. So one is that a lot of companies just talk to people within the building. Okay, people have lots of good ideas, but you can't build them all, and you haven't necessarily validated them with the market. The second issue that it raises is that when you say you're getting user feedback, is talking to the user enough? Like if you think back to the first image that I showed you with the Google and the Apple products on there, Steve Jobs didn't really go to Apple customers and say, well, what should I build? And then the Apple customer said, well, actually, I think you should build like a little computer that looks like a flat plate that you can touch and, bingo, away goes the laptop. What Steve Jobs did is he got an understanding of what they did and didn't like. And a lot of that is through what we call contextual research or contextual inquiry. So why is it important for publishing? Well, I think one of the reasons it's important for publishing is there's been a real revolution in the way that publishing has actually delivered its services within the last 20 years. So for about 400 years it was unchanged. It was basically a printing press. We gave you the books, say, like a master guide, gave you the loose leaf, and then we said, okay, it's over to you now. What you actually did with that, how you used that, what the end point of your research was, didn't really impact us because there was very little we could do to accommodate that because we simply gave you a print product. So we started off with, a very paper-based client base. So everything was on paper and that was our traditional model. Then we moved to more of, a mixture of online and paper. Then we had things like a lot of the job roles of clients that we have actually changed. There are new skill sets, new demands. People are going into sort of a relationship style business as well. It's not just hiding in an office and crunching out spreadsheets or doing print-based research. There's a change in the way that people's jobs are performed. Okay, people are doing stuff remotely. I spoke to someone, or actually went and visited someone a couple of years ago up in Brisbane. He used to do part of his work process on the golf course. There were things that he could do in 10 minutes that he had to electronically sign. He had an app on his iPad and he just did it while he was waiting to tee off between holes. So, or while he was in the car waiting to pick up his daughter from school. So there's that whole aspect of where are people doing work and what they're doing for work is actually changing, and we as a publisher or the whole publishing industry have got to keep up with this and actually be able to accommodate the way people need to work. So a simple example of the difference between what we say is observing people and actually asking people what they think. We call it the Bolognese test. So if you were to ask somebody, tells you that they cooked spaghetti bolognese last night, and you say, okay, well, what did you do? They might say something like, okay, well, I just fried the meat, I added the vegetables and the sauce, I cooked the pasta, served the meal, bingo. That's what I did. What more do you want? What more could I do? But the difference is, if you actually went to see them, probably looked a bit more like that, okay? And this is what we're talking about with actually observing things. So what you might find is that if you actually observe that same person, you might find that, okay, the pots were dirty. They had to wash them up before they could actually start. They forgot to buy onions, so then they have to make a decision to work around, okay, well, do I just use garlic, or do I use leek, or do I just go without that sort of whole onion family flavour? You need double portions. Like if you like our family, we try and cook twice as much so we can take something in the next day. Okay, these are all issues that that you often forget about when you're talking about what you do. You have to chop the vegetables. Okay, fry the mince, drain off the fat. That's what some people do. It's an extra step. Put up the child's DVD because somebody's screaming in the lounge and you're in the kitchen trying to get stuff done. Smoke alarm goes off while you're putting on the DVD. Okay, spouse is celiac, so they've got to do gluten-free spaghetti. Okay, Junior won't eat spaghetti bolognese, they'll only eat chicken nuggets with tomato sauce. So these are all things that you think about a task and you apply this to a workflow task. There are lots of other little steps, impediments that are actually part of the workflow. And that's the difference between asking somebody what they do and watching what people do, is that you uncover all these mini steps and sequences. So if, for example, I was a kitchen designer or somebody who was writing a cookbook, I would have a lot of ideas from this sort of an observation about things that I could do to make this a more efficient process. Oh, got the last one, was keep spouses late. So the key is that observing behaviour and observing task will actually drive the insight and the understanding of what somebody is trying to do when they're completing a task, whether it's cooking spaghetti bolognese or completing a piece of research. So it's more detailed. You get those sort of rich observations, the steps, what happened before a task, what happened after a task, interruptions, all those things that you don't capture through a standard Q&A. Again, as I mentioned when we were looking at the last slide, you get immediately ideas and questions that pop up when you're watching somebody doing something. It's like, well, why did you do that? Why didn't you do this when your business process states that this is the way that you complete research? Why are you going over here? Why are you using Google and not LexisNexis or Office Word? So these are the sorts of things that you get from actually watching people. It's difficult to articulate why you do what you do because you just do it. And a lot of people don't think about this. And one of the interesting things when we actually go and see people as part of the contextual inquiry, which is this methodology, is they start to think about things, about why they're doing what they're doing, and it crystallises in their own mind some of those issues. But before you actually go and do that and you observe somebody, there's a lot of those sort of hidden steps, and the intents are not immediately obvious to both the user and the person that you're speaking to. Okay, now behaviour doesn't lie. This isn't to say that people lie when you ask them what they do. It's just that there's a greater truth in action rather than in telling. You're doing something, you're doing it for a reason, and you're doing it because that's what you do and that's what you need to do. So that's an underlying truth in behaviour that you can only get through observation. You can't really get it through talking to someone. So the other key thing is that you get those work patterns and you can start to build up user stories. So if you get back to the example of the bolognese test, you wouldn't just go and see one person cooking spaghetti bolognese, you'd go and see 6 or 7 different people. People who are young, people who are old, people who are maybe single, people who are working in a hotel. So you look at all these different examples of people cooking spaghetti bolognese and you look for those commonalities that underpin a common user story. Okay, so it's about getting the workflow, the steps and sequences. So from the point of view of both publishing and the example I used for the bolognese, it's like what order do you do things in? What are those sequences? Why does somebody do it in a particular order? Why do they vary it? And you'll only get that through observation. And this is the key. You see the behaviour, you understand the intent of what they're trying to do, and that provides you with a design insight to actually produce something that meets their needs. And the methodology we're talking about is contextual inquiry. Now, it's known as contextual design. Contextual inquiry comes under a few guises, but basically it's the same. It's based on observing a user or observing a customer and getting those insights. So for Walters, in the case of Walters Kluwer, we use a company called In Context that are based in the US, and they've worked with our company for I think the best part of a decade using this methodology, and they've worked with everyone from sort of surgeons and medical health producers to car manufacturers right through to publishers. So it's a widespread methodology. It can be used, basically with any type of product or service. So, okay, well, what is it? So I've given you a rough idea. It's not just watching people cook spaghetti bolognese. Okay, it's generally a 2-hour observation. So you're getting 2 hours of somebody's time, which is quite a good chunk. I put in there user versus advocate. So in this group we've got a lot of advocates, so knowledge managers, can be, or librarians can be considered advocates. You also need to get users as well, because there's different intents, different behaviours around a user and an advocate. So you always try and get your different types of users when you go and do an observation. It's at the workstation. If you're going to go and see somebody and you want to watch the work, then you want to watch the work where they're actually working. So, we've been out to see people in the corporate sector, and they've been quite worried about us coming along and sort of sitting down, and you get the feeling they're tidying up their desk. I mean, don't tidy up your desk, because your desk is a product of the way your brain works. In fact, there's a... Well, you can laugh, but there was an article in The Guardian last year saying that you really ought not to tidy your desk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you're fighting your own system.
Yeah.
So if you have a tidy desk, all well and good, but if your desk is all over the place, you tidy it up, it's just going to return to its state, because that's not the way you... It's not the way
They always sound so morally superior, don't they?
They do.
People with tidy desks.
Well, maybe I should send you the link to the article, and you can just forward this on in the future. Workstation if possible, because we have had, doing this methodology, we have had sessions where we've been put in a meeting room, and you can tell that they don't work in the meeting room, because 10 minutes later IT's got to come on and show them how to get onto the network, and then they've got to go and get this book that we asked them for. So if you were to ever to do this sort of study yourselves, as knowledge managers, you could easily do this sort of thing within an organisation. You'd have to insist that it is where you do the work. If someone works from home, all well and good. If they work from the car, or from the golf course, fine, follow them around. It's all valid information. We try and concentrate on real tasks. So if somebody's preparing a piece of advice, that's what we ask them to do. We don't say, okay, I want to see you look up Bamford or some other case. Okay, we say we want to see a real task, and then we see where all those different pieces fit in. So we get a whole range of tasks that are important to that particular user or that particular segment, and then we see which of those that they're currently doing, and then we watch them do it. So some of it's pretty tedious. We've seen accountants go through a spreadsheet going, ticking away down the list. But it was valuable. It was valuable because we learned that they were that they had to print something out at that point, because they were doing comparisons and making notes. So it's very, very important that you get the real task and they use the things that they always use. Okay, we set it up as master apprentice. So if I come in to see if we're doing something in the legal space and I want to see how librarians, knowledge managers are doing something, I sit down and say, you pretend I'm on year 10 work experience and you just show me what you do. Show me your job. So you set it up as master apprentice, and it's very, very important to do that, because if you don't, if you go in there from the position of I know a bit about your job, then things get skipped over, details get missed, and it becomes the process of validation. So you really go in there and just say, I want to learn your job, show me what you do. So I just mentioned it right then, show me, that's the mantra. Okay, don't tell me show me. I said, well, actually, I produced this piece of advice. Okay, where is it? Show me. Show me what you did. Show me where it is. The questions, okay, so it's not purely observation. You do have your questions, but because you're actually watching a live task, a real task, it's contextualised. So saying, well, why did you do that? Why are you going to Google first for your research? Pick up some of those demographics and also things about the building. Okay, basic demographics can be, quite important. You may find that there's a particular user group that's struggling with a feature or some part of technology. Maybe it's, ginger-haired males over the age of 50. So you find out that that's your problem area. So pick up on that demographic information, but also things, artifacts around the office like work. If you go and visit somebody and they're doing a piece of research, they're in a legal firm and the library's 3 levels below, and they just say, well, actually I'll just look it up on Google, well, maybe you've got something there. Maybe you know that it's a locational issue, but that's the impediment to it. So you pick up all that information that influences the way that people do tasks. Okay, so I've mentioned that, the work environment. and collect artefacts. We will say, oh, can we have a printout of that? Okay, have a look at that. Okay, we'll get some sensitive information at times, but we redact all that. Everything's anonymised. We're not actually interested in the details. We're interested in where it fits into a workflow. And just get that intent behind the behaviour. Why are they doing that? If they're doing it one particular way and it doesn't look logical or it looks curious or it looks interesting, ask them. If something's really working well, why they're doing it? Like, what's the end goal of doing it that particular way? So you might find that there's something really quite unusual about it. They might be doing it that way because the printer's broken. They might be doing it that way because they have an issue with the logging. They might kind of be consistently logged out of the product. It often helps people to understand what it isn't as much as what it is. So from our point of view, okay, it's not a question and answer based interview. Okay, it's observation. We do ask questions, but it's not 100 questions about a product, about what you do. It's contextualised to real work tasks. Okay, we don't go in there and look at existing products and services. So if we were to go to a major legal firm and they didn't have any of our products at all, it would be invaluable to see how people worked with other products. So the problem with Q&A is often that you're very concentrated on just what you do or what you produce. It's often good to see a particular task or a workflow that doesn't involve you or maybe involves you and someone else, and then see where the gaps are, see what the handover points are like, where are the inefficiencies in the process. Okay, and it's not a product show and tell. So that's important. We don't get in there and flog a product. We're just in there to see what they do. The training exercise. And this is one that's very, you have to be really rigid about this. So we go in there and we see people making a complete hash of IntelliConnect searches. Okay? It's invaluable. It's gold to see that. Because there's a usability issue. Okay? Or there's a training issue. But as soon as you step in, you've ruined the experiment, basically. So you can have maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end to say, well, these are where the search filters are, or this is how you search within a product, but you don't do it in the middle of your observation because you're losing all that information of how they actually get around the fact that they don't know how to search. Okay? And it's not just search, it could be anything, but don't step in, basically, the lesson there. Okay, it's not trying to be sort of aggressive here, but it's, if you go back to the sort of Apple example, the Google example, what you want to get out of contextual inquiry is an understanding of what users or what customers like and what they don't like, what keeps them awake at night, what's a hassle to them when they're doing their job, what do they find really difficult to do. Because they're not designers. People aren't closet publishing product designers that you go and see in an accounting firm or a legal firm. You do get the occasional ones that burst out of the closet and they've basically got wireframes and maps of how they think a legal product should be. But it's better for us and for them if you get an understanding of what does and doesn't work, what they do and don't like, because then you can come back with an idea, present it to them, and you're halfway there. And that's probably the same. If you were to ever do this process within law firms, is to really get an idea of, like if you're designing a new process, it's not to get them to design a process for you, but to understand what does and doesn't work with the current processes, and then you present them with a new process, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's good or that's not good. So it's really about workflow observation. So I really like this picture. So if we were to go in and see this guy, there's a whole lot going on here. This works. So okay, he's on the phone and he's looking at his mobile. So it's what's going on there. Why isn't that working? Post-it notes, is that his network password there on the yellow post-it like it is around our building? Are there login issues? He's got some sort of a planning chart. Why isn't that online? Is he using the Filofax? These are all things about workflow, and he's got a heck of a racket going on next to it. So there's a whole lot of information that you can get by being there and asking those contextualised questions, observing what he's actually doing that you can't actually get from just doing a Q&A on the telephone or seeing the same fellow in a meeting room is not going to be the same each experience. So this is one of my favourite little graphics, but if you think about process and workflow, this is really what we're talking about. And by impediments, we're also talking about inefficiencies, annoyances. What's the brick wall? Because this is the way people work. Workflow will go around an impediment. There are workarounds, and you know within your own organisations that you might set up a process. People do it in a different way. It probably drives you nuts. And it's the same with people that use our products. And the reason is because there'll be an impediment somewhere. There's a reason why it's not the best way of doing it, why it's not the most efficient or cost-effective way of doing it. So if you can understand where that brick wall is or where those brick walls are, and God help you with your product, like as WK, then you'll have a very good understanding of what you need to do to make a better product or service, because you'll understand where we're trying to go to remove those impediments. And from the perspective of Walters Kluwer, what we're trying to do is to come up with things that remove those impediments, because if we can save people time on particular processes and workflows, imagine if you could save a partner 15 minutes a day across a firm, what that would amount to at the end of the year. If we had a product that did that, then we know that it's worth taking to the market, because it's actually making our clients money. And the only way that you can do that is to understand where are the impediments, how can you make it more efficient, more cost effective. Having said that, it is quite difficult to get people to participate in this project, because as I've said before, it needs to be the workstation, and then a lot of people are afraid of that we're going to come in and see that. But as I said, we're not there to judge people. That's the way people work.
I've got someone with an office phone.
We've got former editor-in-chief of tax and accounting desk look like that. It still does look like that. But he gets his job done. Or are you afraid that, like Donald Draper, you do your best work lying on a sofa with a glass of scotch on your chest? If that's how you come up with your best ideas and you're most efficient, great. We're not there to judge. You're not there to judge. You're there to understand what makes people work efficiently, and how can we possibly build on that. No one's seen Mad Men?
Oh yeah.
Greatest anti-hero of corporate television. Okay, so to take it away from the bolognese and to bring it to more of an example level, be, I guess, relevant and familiar to you. So if we're in there as Walters Kluwer, we've got our 2 hours and we say, okay, we want to see how you prepare legal advice. And we'll be seeing a number of different people, maybe different people within the firm, a junior, how they would take part in this process, obviously not doing the whole thing, versus a partner, versus someone else elsewhere in the chain, and big firms, small firms. So you'll go there and you'll watch them for 2 hours preparing some legal advice. So the sorts of things that are interesting for us, what triggered the task? So was it a phone call from the client? Was it a phone call from the partner? Was it a referral from another company that you work with? This is really, really important to understand. It's important for us as publishers to understand, how did the task actually start? Like, what kicked it off? Was it an email? Was it a phone call? So the frequency and formats, I've mentioned email or a phone call. Okay, how often? Like, did they have to go backwards and forwards? What was the process for actually getting the task in the head, understanding what the brief is? So it's very important to understand that and observe that if you can. Like sitting on a phone call, sitting on a meeting. And Jessica and I sat in on one particular meeting where an external came and actually ran a meeting with the corporate tax accountant that we were observing, somebody from KPMG. So sitting on those things, understand how the issue is communicated and how it develops. Research, was there any research? We don't actually know or necessarily assume that somebody's going to have to research it. What did they use if they did research it? Did they go straight to Google? Did they go to CCLs? Did they go to Lexis? Did they go somewhere else that we're not even thinking about? You know, is there somebody that we don't know about? That's really, really important to understand. Okay, what steps did they take and in what order? What did they do first? How did the research task develop? Okay, how was it captured? Who was involved? They're all really, really important points at this stage. Okay, did they find anything? Did they find the answer? Did they get their answer? Did they get part of the answer from one provider, part of the answer from someone else? What sort of state was it in? Was it the answer as a whole answer? Was it something that they had to synthesise? These are all really important things to observe. Did they save it? Did they export it? So from the point of view of Walter's Clue, that's really important for us to think, okay, not just what people are doing when they're researching, okay, but if we're using IntelliConnect, for example, and there's a research task completed, where's it going? Where's the end result of that research going? Is it going to the client file? What systems are saved in? Is it just plonked on the desktop? Okay, is it printed out? These are all really important things because then it gives us an understanding of what we need to connect to. We need to provide a really smooth handoff point if it is in fact a handoff point. What knowledge is reused? This is really important from the point of view of research, is how much existing IP is within an organisation. How do they access that? How do they employ that knowledge? Where does it live? Is it just on a shared drive? You know, how easy is it to find that? And what do they do in terms of customisation? Is it just deleting the client name and putting another client in? We wouldn't do that, would we? We change the date as well. So how does that customisation process work? And this is a really key one, and this is something we probably overlooked years ago before we started doing this, is who else is involved? Okay, is it delegated? Is part of the task delegated to a junior? Do we collaborate with other partners in the firm? Do we go to an external? Do we go to a specialist? Okay, do we refer parts of the task completely externally? So it's really important to understand how that works. And from our point of view is, who are these people and can they access the information they need to? Do we as publishers make it too difficult for the people that our clients are working with to access the information? So that's something else that we need to tackle. And this is a really key one as well, interruptions and competing tasks. So a lot of people will just do a task for an hour and a half, maybe even 20 minutes, and then they've got to put it down. Maybe they've got to go to court, maybe they've got to go to client, maybe the phone rings. So from a design point of view, this is very important, is okay, what happens after 20 minutes? And we've seen this going to watch people, they're logged into something, they're doing something for 20, 25 minutes, then they're logged out and then they go right back to the start again, they've got to open up files. From the point of view of us, it's like, how easy is it for them to pick up the task again and keep going? Like, how efficient is that process? Can they remember where they were at? Is the workflow captured? And can you reopen something at the point that they were previously using it? Or do they have to go back to the start again? So these are all questions of efficiency that are really important. Okay, review and approval. It's a critical part of the process when you think about preparing legal advice. Who's reviewing it? Who's approving it? Are they able to access the information that's produced? What's the format of that review and approval process? How does it work? They're all really important things for us. Okay, and the format, what is it? Is it a letter? Is it a phone call? Is it PDF? Does it need to be locked for secure purposes? Is a Microsoft Word document with the firm logo on top, is that sufficient? They're all really valuable things for us to find out. And last but not least, client communication and the follow-up actions. How was it actually communicated to the client? Was it a meeting? What was prepared for the client? What was sent to the client? They're all really key things to actually observe and to find out. So having done that with 8 or more users, say for example, you're going to get a pretty good idea of what are the common steps What are the steps that we can abstract and say, this is what everybody does when they prepare legal advice, and what are the steps that are different? Where are the variations? And then once you've got a handle on that, then you're really on to being able to design a better process or a better product or service. So after the observation, we do what we call, the first thing we do is interpretation. So that's where we sit, we take the notes that we take the interview back and we interpret them, and we say, what is the user trying to do? What's the important thing for the user? What's the intent? What's the behaviour? And then each of those is broken into just a single note, a single sentence that characterises a particular piece of behaviour around workflow. So that's about 2 hours as well. They look something like this. So you have like a selection of notes about a task. So this was somebody in the corporate tax area that we were observing. They were actually doing a refund opportunity, so working their way through a process that involved Ernst & Young and the ATO and a couple of other advisors or externals as well. And then we broke it out into notes. So each one of those characterises a behaviour or a key intent or a key fact about the way people do things. So then we do what we call create an affinity wall, which is where you build a huge wall of all the user stories. And each one of those yellow columns of labels represents one user story, and then the blue note synthesises that user story in the first person. So you're talking about the user, you're not talking about WK, or if it's a firm, you're not talking about the firm, you're talking purely about the user. So all those are built out and anonymised into stories that represent all the different segments and sub-segments that you've studied. Okay, and you build out your workflow sequences. So you have things like, so this is one preparing for some advice. It was what triggered the event, what the intents, what they're actually doing to get the client in through his door, to get a better understanding of the client's underlying financial position. That's us trying to get an understanding of what are they actually trying to do at each stage of the process. So then we build what we call consolidations, which is like the wall. We'll say this is how somebody does one particular task. We'll get 6, 7 different examples, and we'll try and abstract them into what we call a consolidated workflow, which is understanding the activities and the intents at each of those stages, common and the variance as well, to really get an understanding of how people are doing stuff and where the variations are. Now this is a photograph from just a couple of weeks ago when we were doing our corporate tax project. It's where you walk the wall. We have a number of stakeholders, and by that I mean internal stakeholders. So we have editors, we have designers, salespeople, we've got people from the product management team. You go around, you read those user stories, and you come up with solutions. Wouldn't it be good if we did this? Wouldn't it be good if we could do that? So that's how you build out your affinity wall. So it starts out with stories, then you come up with your solutions. And from that, you'll pick your solutions. A lot of them roll up into a bigger, better product or enhancements to existing products. Then we do what we call visioning, which is where you build out an idea. So you flesh out an idea, and it's actually very visual. It's just drawing stick people, diagrams. So you work out, okay, how in the mind of the user, what is the ideal experience for my new product or my new service? So you say, okay, I'm a partner of a legal firm. What's the ideal way for me to prepare a piece of legal advice? And then you would draw that experience, and it's completely blue sky. Nothing gets knocked in or out. You just say, this is the perfect world for me as a partner of a legal firm to do this particular task. And then that's how you build out the solution. So then you go and do a bit of validation. So prototypes can either be what we call clickable wireframes. Anybody heard of that term before? Yep? No? So it's just basically like a dummied up web page where you can click on certain things. So it's not a real web page, it's just a prototype. and then you can capture what people do. Or you can do what we did here a couple of years ago, which is paper prototypes, where you just print out something on an A3 and you take it to a firm or to a particular user and say, what do you think? And you'll often do what we call A/B testing. So you'll have this one or this one, which works for you, or A, B or C. So this is a project that we worked on sort of up until early last year, called Transforming Information. So we looked at small firm accountants, both metropolitan and regional, and there were actually significant differences between the way that they were doing things between the metropolitan and regional areas. So we had a number of findings. So one was around practical content. So accountants, and this is one of the key learnings that we've had as an organisation, sort of the big difference between what we would call research in the legal context and what you would call research in an accounting context. So accountants are smash and grab people. We've been trying to sell them a fine dining experience. In terms of research, they just want McDonald's drive-through. Okay.
Can I ask a question now?
Yeah.
Or later? What's best?
Oh, I've got questions at the end, but
Just interested in practical content.
yeah.
Is it CCH was finding that employers don't necessarily want practical content?
That's what we'd like to find out. Okay, and that's where we're kind of going with this. So we assume that they do at certain levels, it's just where and when.
Mm-hmm.
So if I give you an example from the accountants, if there's a case handed down, they don't really care what one judge said as opposed to another judge. Okay, if it's a high court case, or if they're going to an ATO ruling, they don't just want to know the legal the legal story that this has changed this day. It's tell me what to do about it. I'm not interested in the legal interpretation. I want to know how it affects my clients. I want to know what to do about it. So that was the message that they gave us. They were saying, you're taking me some of the way, but you're making me walk the last 200 metres in the rain. I've got to read the damn head note myself and then work out what the practical implications are. I've got to work out how this affects the small business down the road or this high income earner. I've got to do it myself. So that was the message that we got from them. They want a little bit more in the way of tools. And
so you got a feeling it's different. So you got a feeling it's different for lawyers. That you don't know.
My gut instinct is that some of them do want more practical content. I think at a certain level, I think they just want the legal. They want to be able to. Well, they have to get across the material themselves. Yes, and they've got to draw their own inferences. So I think, but certainly that's something you want to see. And practical content doesn't just mean telling me what to do. It can be things like tools and calculators, which could be very useful for in the legal space. The sort of family law, there's certain calculations that you want to be able to make. So in the legal context, it could be a lot more of those tools, tables, lookup things. So they're going from compliance to advisory, and they found that it was a real struggle, because they're used to just sitting in a room playing with an Excel spreadsheet. Look, that's probably a bit of a negative portrayal, but I think they're very, very comfortable doing that, not so comfortable going into that advisory space, and they wanted some tools to help them with that journey. Super cautious. They're very, very risk averse, and that was quite a key finding for us. So they weren't prepared to take a punt on something. They had to absolutely know that was the case. Something that we've sort of covered a little bit previously in the presentation, but it's just whatever's easiest. I mean, if it's an email, if it's a phone call, that's the way it's going to be done. Okay. They live in fear of the ATO, so the ATO was driving a lot of what they do. It was driving a lot of their workflow. If they were getting a phone call from the ATO that they were interested in BAS work from a particular client, it was drop everything, get onto it before it turns into an audit. So it's that relationship with the regulator that we probably didn't have as good a handle on before we did this. is probably something that's common with the legal sector, is that there's more pressure to articulate the value of what you actually do. A lot of it's because the compliance side of things has been commoditised. There's a downward pressure on that, but they really do need to show that they're worth their money, they're worth their fee. And they were struggling synthesising and presenting information to clients. So did they have the tools? An Excel spreadsheet is often not the best way to go to somebody who runs a building company and show them why they ought to be doing something differently. Could they have graphs? How could they get the information that they needed to get to their clients in a different manner that was more effective to tell the story? Because they're not storytellers. See some agreement there? Yep. And the other thing, it was very difficult for them to identify and segment their clients. So everything was in their head. They had a sort of, got the A, B, C list of clients by value. But if there was a change in law, and then they had to think, okay, well, which of my clients does this apply to? A lot of their clients they only see once a year, so they don't have those regular touch points. They found it difficult to think, okay, who is this relevant to? Right. So it's a very manual process. So, and this is on the software side of things. There weren't a lot of alternatives to actually instantly say, this has changed, and this. So, for example, there's a fuel tax credit case that we looked at when the ATO lost, and companies were due a lot of fuel tax credits. It was ATO versus Linfox, I think, and there were a lot of companies that were able to go back, do a stop the clock and get 5 years worth of additional fuel tax. It was worth millions to people. And firms like Deloitte's, KPMG, PwC got on the phone and just hammered clients, absolutely hammered clients to get them to do this work. But further down the chain, it was very difficult for people to actually to do that because they haven't got the time to crunch those numbers. So this is an example of what we did in response to that. Okay, nice smiley. It was basically something that would do what we call capture trigger events, which is like news cases, macroeconomic events that have been handed down. Hit the client with this information. This has changed. You need to be aware of it. This is the potential impact. And these are the 15, 20 clients that are actually affected by it because we're able to actually see their data. So that's something that we're looking at sort of expanding to other areas, potentially that's valuable to the legal market as well. But that's how it started, and that's pretty much where it's gone. It's actually been brought to market on April 4. It's called IQ. So there's a bit of buzz around that. But that all started, and it's a product that we think is new to market. There's no existing competitors, and it all started from that contextual design, actually going out and serving people. So that's something that's coming to market just in a few weeks. So the one that we've most recently been working on, which was in the corporate segment, so we looked at corporate tax professionals in Sydney and Melbourne. So we had a number of findings. And this may resonate with a few people here because I'm sure you do work with corporates. But they need to go elsewhere for expertise and advice. They're always going to law firms and the Big Four and the Big 10, if you like, accounting firms, because they're essentially micro teams. They need that assistance. They're very, very small teams. We found that they're often in areas where not much changes. Okay, you might be working for a corporation that has a very narrow field of business. There's not much change, not much need for research. But if there is a change, it tends to be material to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and that feeds back into the top one. Then they need to go to a law firm. Okay, if they think they're in trouble with the way they're structuring their intercompany loans, and they need to go to one of the Big Four because they think there's potentially a large refund opportunity. So that was a key finding for us, that sort of research workflow is quite different for that segment. That they have a lot of compliance and day-to-day stuff that they're very, very familiar with, as opposed to if you look at a small firm accountant, okay, or even a lawyer, they're dealing with lots of different clients from many different fields, and there's sort of a wider field and potentially more that will change over the course of a year. Again, very low appetite for risk. A lot about where you are with the risk profile, the ATO risk profile. So they're constantly being expected to keep the whatever company, corporation they're working for in that sort of low risk quadrant. A lot of disconnection we found, a lot of inefficiencies between financial accounting, tax accounting, between the in-house legal counsel, everyone else that they deal with is very, very, I wouldn't say poor path of communication, but they're very disconnected to other parts of the business. We found a lot of legacy software and solutions that were in there cluttering up the place, so they didn't have end-to-end solutions. And I think that's for any job role when you go in there and they're having to complete a bit on this system, a bit on this system, but such and such a database system and Lotus Notes, which we've got as an archive over here. That sort of thing's going on all the time. It's not efficient. And from a design perspective, you could actually make a lot of headway in an end-to-end solution. They had very unique requirements in terms of the research. So they needed fact patterns that were very, very specific. They wanted circumstances, cases that very much mirrored their own, not only the actual issue, but also the business. And that was something for us to learn. With things that we do, like worked examples, that we needed content that matched this sort of scenario, not just Farmer Joe wants to depreciate one wheelbarrow. Okay, that doesn't happen at the corporate end of town. There's much bigger biggies. Okay, and they're perceived as a cost centre, and that's something that they're keen to change. They think that it actually inhibits a lot of what they do. Is the fact that they're perceived as being a cost centre, whereas there is an opportunity for them to present themselves as saving the business money or making the business money, if you like. And this was a key one for us, is they needed to bounce ideas off peers and networks. So they couldn't do everything online, they couldn't do everything just through paper. They actually needed to talk to people, they needed to talk to peers, colleagues. Well, often they didn't have any colleagues, or they might have had one colleague. Sometimes that colleague's in another office in another city. So very much isolated, and they needed those networks. So that was another valuable finding for us, is that this is a very interesting area to get into, that whole sort of network community aspect. So that's actually ongoing, so it's all strictly for this room only.
Just tweeted it.
Have you? Yeah, have you? Yes. Crikey. Should have moved on to that a bit. Okay, so what's next?
Sorry, another.
Legal sector. We're very interested in doing this sort of work within the legal sector. And then I guess that's where you people come in, because we're looking top to bottom, and by that we mean top end of town, plus the sort of smaller legal end of the market, and looking at those advocates, users, the whole sort of processes. The types of things that we're interested in are those key workflows. So some of those are quite similar to the ones we've looked at in the corporate area and in accounting. Some of them will be completely different. So it would be a question of getting into those, what are those key workflows. So I think as knowledge managers, you have a pretty good idea of what the key workflows are for, say, a partner. Identifying them and coming to you and saying, okay, well, what are those key workflows? What brings the most value to the business? What are the pain points in the business? Okay, technological impacts. Very interested to see how that's impacting the legal sector at the moment. We do hear things on the grapevine about the way things are changing with what can be done, electronically, whether people have to be present for certain parts of legal processes now, electronic signing, all these sorts of things, identification. They're all things that are coming back to us. We'd actually like to get in and watch, and see how this goes. What's changing? What are the hot issues? That's where we'd like to get into with this. So that's pretty much where we're at the moment, and that's part of why Dave's been brought on, is because we're really trying to drive our strategy in the legal sector this year. And this would be a key part of it, is doing that sort of research. Content software integration, that's another one. I think if you look back at those sort of corporate and accounting examples, that's really where you can provide the value, I think, in the legal sectors. How do you connect with those other tools that we use? You know, particularly if it's going through to like submission to courts and lodgement and those sorts of things. What are the integration points? How do they work? Where's content the most useful? And that's even a question that we've raised. Is it the most useful for, say, a lawyer or even an accountant to actually go to a research platform to get content? Is it more useful if that content appears somewhere else in the workflow, if it's presented to them somewhere else? Those are the sorts of questions that we'll be seeking to answer. So, any takes? So that's it. Any questions?
One of my questions about workflow is taking the product as it exists.
Yep.
What is going to be considered working towards something like salmon logging, so that we don't have to set up individual accounts for people? Because, for instance, I do most of that, and I really like to get to a point where I can say to people, right, there's the internet, you click on that, it's going to take you in, and you're going to have your account there ready to go for you, and we can concentrate more on getting it set up with trackers and things like that, rather than me having to set up individual accounts, which is quite time consuming.
Yeah, well, that's the sort of thing we're going to look at, see how it's working, not just in your firm but across other firms. I mean, we are working on logging at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm not sort of specifically on that particular project,
Yeah.
but that's something that we'd seek to understand, is what's the best way of doing that, and what's the most efficient way. Are there ways that other people are doing that we can learn from? And that would be from looking at how other processes work, how other systems log in, and what we can actually do on that. So yeah, it's definitely on the radar, and we're aware of it. Because again, it's like that's an efficiency thing.
Yeah, very much so. It's
you,
the
and
one
also for
thing
them
that's
as well.
it's kind of almost like a mental thing. And for years I've had people say, there's a lot of content in CCH, and I go, well, I actually don't very much like it. And now I'm getting young graduates who are actually saying, can I please have a look at the CCH? It's my favourite product. That's a big change over the last few years.
Yeah.
But in terms of other products, we look at click and go, and we're not at that point with until.
Not at the moment, no. But it's being looked at. So,
yeah, but then they can't have trackers and things like that.
it's just the likely fixing the anonymous access.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that Tracker, because the way Tracker was designed was you had to have an individual profile.
Yeah, no,
to save the
that's
tracker,
why we
so
do.
it's,
That's why I do what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people have that facility.
No, that's definitely inefficient.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's crazy making.
No, and that's there are a couple of projects. We've got a news strategy project that's happening at the moment. That's going to look at a lot of that, plus the work that we have to do. And the second, because that's sort of company wide, if you like. So not just the legal sector, but everybody essentially struggles with those sorts of issues. Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't know whether this is going too much into the detail, because I've done that type of investigation before we going in and talking about that. Did you do that? And did you also do you guys also transcribe the interview as well, so that you can make your way?
We record audio.
Yeah, you record the audio.
Yeah, and then go back to it.
Yeah.
But the people in context that we use, what they always advise was really only use the audio as like a double check.
Yeah.
And the reason that you do that is what you need to be doing with contextual inquiry is when you're the note taker, you need to be already making some of those interpretations, like framing in that sort of a way. It becomes it becomes quite tedious because I mean, from my days as a journalist, if you had 20 minutes of audio into an interview, and you get play back, it's like 2-3 hours. Editor screaming down the next saying, where's my effing story, which is how editors speak in newspapers. So, it's a tape recorder. So yeah, it's really, you should be summarising them, but as a backup, definitely have it. The other issue is whether people are comfortable. So I think if it's in your own phone, probably, but do we have anyone, Jess, that refused?
I think the audio is good for quotes as well if you're wanting to put a direct quote in your material, and you're always able to write it down verbatim.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the quotes are really good they're, because sometimes that quote can sort of really deliver a key message about the way somebody's doing something. So yeah, definitely use audio if you can. Any other questions?
When you put the stick paper on the wall,
Yep.
was there one thing out of that you thought, oh, geez, we missed that all these years? Because I imagine it's just you can really see the line go across. Was there one thing that stood out?
A number of things. Yeah, I mean, depending on which project. I mean, in the first one we did, that whole the accountants didn't really perform research in our understanding and context of it. That they basically were just double checking. It was like a rate or a table. They weren't reading lengthy bits of content. And what we found was the logging process was actually longer than the research task. So we made a few changes. So we produced something called IntelliGadget, which was a big hit for them, which was a Windows 7 Windows Vista, I think, gadget that just enabled you to store your login details. Only worked for the personalised users. Store your login details and just do a quick search. And it will bring up the results within the gadget or quick launch in telecoms. So that was like kind of one, and it was very popular. It was one thing that came off the wall. But you have to be prepared to be confronted when you build this wall, because we've had people in our organisation walk around and makes them very cranky.
Yes, I spent a long time on that.
Yeah, you're wasting time. But it's, and some of the truths are uncomfortable, some of them are revealed. So Jess, did you have any sort of really jumped out for you?
I think with corporate tax, it was the 8 people that we observed. Research just didn't really form part of their workflow when we were there sitting with them. Like, research was very minimal, and that's what we rely on as a business. People are jumping between teleconnect, and I mean it's similar with the accountants, that they just use their own knowledge, or they use like internal precedents that they have, and rehashing and saying goodbye.
But you get out a lot of commercial practitioners who have transactional practices who would be exactly the same, and then when they actually do get it done, then you find out.
They're off to PwC in the case of the...
I'm thinking about people in my firm who would not do anything along those lines. So basically, when that pops up, once a quarter or whatever, they ask me if they want to do it. Because there's no upside for them to them actually having to learn the product, because they won't remember it from time to time.
That was another big thing that popped out right, was that sort of casual use, usage. Any other questions?
So when you go from the outside, those like office suite web apps, like that call to action, so that they do like those adding, not apps. So that in the event that they do put a citation into a Word document, the trigger comes in and says, okay, red flag on this one, or this PDR is being overruled, and all that type of stuff. Is that good enough? Or
That's...
I know that'd be really hard to
certainly, but again, it'd be good to see that. It'd be good to see a workflow where that's potentially the answer. But
I'm sure you have a field day in a law firm with workflow. Some of the things I see, I go, really?
But do you?
That's what you do?
Well, why do you think you're doing that? Like, what's the? If you think back to that brick wall, what's
I loved that graphic actually. I'm going to follow up and go, can you send me all your graphics so I can send them to my boss? Because it's just too hard. They're so time pressed that anything that is like, a logical, yes, I need to go here, they just will not do it. There's no, if it involves, I have to go here and I have to search for something, that's not searching.
Yeah, that's the sort of that's sort of invaluable.
Yeah, from my observations in how people do their legal research, I think at some point they just illustrated what's going on. There's a metacognitive disconnect with lawyers and how they interact with information. And I don't think they're something more logical and sequential, but it's all about problem solving. Besides being challenged about law, I don't think they know how to think about thinking. So it's lawyers, but that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And you see this in graduates and you see this even in city staff who used to print resources and now have to jump across to digital. I work for the Australian Taxation Office and we actually did 90% of our collection in 2014, and as we speak now, we're closing down a lot of our libraries and we might be 5% of the collection. Everything is digital. I do a lot of training for lawyers. I do have a legal right for myself as well. I do train lawyers, and I'm finding that there is that disconnect.
Okay, well, that's really interesting.
And then I went looking to see why is that there. But, all the law conferences we go to just find that, what the lawyers say, build the laws, non-build the laws, we can't charge our clients for what we can't really see return investment. But I always think build the laws or unbuild the laws. Build the laws are the revenue right now, unbuild it what's going to come in the future. If we don't invest in our area in the future, we're not going to get one. So, as I say, it's not just in Australia, it's right across, and I don't as trainers, as lawyers managers, as law librarians, as librarians, as information professionals, or whatever name you want to call us, how do we help them to bridge that gap and deal with this content agenda? It's a very interesting methodology. Are you able to send us a link to that methodology?
If you send
Can send you the.
parts of the slides or
there's only a couple that I need to take out.
It would be really, and I loved the graphics. I loved the deal bit. I tell Alex all the time, I'm looking at deal bit cartoon.
I would actually like to run that methodology in the ATO.
Yeah, I can give you a link to. I'll put an email together and I'll probably send it through Sam and I'll put a link to the firm that does the methodology. Because they've got a book and a Bible and a course, and it is a trademarked methodology for that particular firm, but there are other ones that do similar things. But and I'll put something together and I'll
Educators call it action research.
send it out.
Yeah, it's very much like that.
And how is into this practitioner research, it's the same thing, much the same thing.
It's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, but I mean, we are really keen to get sort of into the legal sector. So again, I'll hit up Sam if we get up and running
It would be really interesting.
soon. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Oh, wow. Anyone? No,